Hi folks, it's me, Richard James the Socio. This is my ongoing tour of truth, why the Rockefellers murdered JFK, RFK, and ordered Watergate. Of course, Governor Nelson Rockefeller gave the final okay to kill Kennedy. But you see this kind of macabre building here. Actually, I'm in Montreal, Canada. I'm on the campus of McGill University, which is pretty much one of the evil networks of universities the Rockefellers control. It's a network of universities, the hub of which is Harvard, which has been turned into a diabolical center by the Rockefellers for misinformation and basically programming human minds. That's all they're doing now, programming human minds for the good of the Rockefellers. No such thing as education anymore, unless you're listening to my videos. I'm trying to keep knowledge and truth alive. But the reason I come here ties to why JFK died. You're probably saying, how was that possible? Well, I'll tell you how it's possible. This building here is the Allen Institute. And this is where the Rockefellers conducted their CIA well, I should say their MKUlta experiments, using LSD for mind control, basically programming Manchurian candidates, weaponizing Manchurian candidates to kill political leaders. Oswald was weaponized by the Rockefellers, by the Iran think tank. Originally, I believe he was weaponized to assassinate Vice President Richard Nixon, but that's another story. But Oswald got sent to Russia, was a Manchurian candidate in September of 58. Yeah, that's when Nelson Rockefeller got elected governor. I'll put elected in quotes. Got elected governor of New York State, which was his first stepping stone to the White House. So they were weaponizing these, they're weapons. Deadly as a 500-pound bomb. So this is where they were based. This was a laboratory here. This is where they were doing the experiments. Okay, so eventually those experiments have to be deployed into the real world. And I believe Charles Manson, the Manson family, was one episode of deploying these experiments and programming and put them out there. They got to go from the laboratory to the real world, where they have to basically, destroy human life. Dr. Gottlieb, he was one of the black doctors, Rockefeller black doctors. Actually, the hub of all Rockefeller dark diabolical experiments is the Rockefeller Institute in New York City along the East River. I did a tour there last year. It's a magnificent, I shouldn't say magnificent, it looks like Fort Knox. Doesn't look like an institute or a university, it looks like Fort Knox. Yeah, this is where they conducted their experiments, and I can see there's still people coming in and out of this place. Now, they did, I think in the back there's some more modern buildings back. This is a psychic hospital. Psychic hospital. That's all they do, is psychic research here. And if you could Google this stuff, it's all on the internet, but the Rockefeller Foundation ran the Allen Institute, which is part of McGill University, which is a greater network of diabolical colleges, prestigious diabolical colleges owned by the Rockefellers to basically subjugate the world to Rockefeller rule. That's their purpose now, no other purpose. There's no more education unless you're listening to me. But of course they've outlawed and canceled education now, so any knowledge or truth is going to get smacked out. So you got to be very sneaky here. How you doing? So, anyways, I could go on and on and on. But I want to talk about Oswald. He was weaponized as a Manchurian candidate. He was sent to the Soviet Union. You ever watched the movie Manchurian Candidate, remember? He was sent to the Soviet Union. And see, they're taking pictures of me here because, they're watching me. See, remember, they're trying to smack down truth. And only put out anything you hear in the major media outlets or the internet. It's all basically They're just news outlets for the Rockefellers, all part of their massive disinformation programs. But Oswald was weaponized to be a Manchurian candidate. Now I'll say this, I don't believe Oswald ever shot at the president, but he was put at the crime scene so they could put the Rockefellers could place the blame on Oswald. But we also have the Manchurian candidate, Sirhan. See, he was under a hypnotic, LSD-induced mind control. I could go on and on about the assassination of Robert Kennedy. But you also have Squeaky Fram, Manchurian, Manson, I might be getting kicked out of here, they're watching me. See, they want to stifle the truth. They're moving in on me here. But I'll stay as long as I got the camera. I'm not trying to pick up any human faces. I'm just doing the building here. So if anybody says anything, I'm just doing an architectural chore. I won't even mention MKUlta. Then I'll get really nervous. Actually, it says, you can see right on the building here. I don't know if the camera's picking it up, but you can see that right there, Allen Institute. Just so you know I'm not playing you. You can see that. See that, Allen Institute? There it is. Just to show you I'm not playing you. Do your Googling, folks. Research it. MKUlta. There's nothing I'm making up here. I'm trying to keep the camera up because I don't want to pick up any human faces. We don't need to. We're not about that. We're about why the Rockefellers killed JFK, RFK, and ordered Watergate. See, that's right. I mentioned Sirhan. Now we got Squeaky Fromm. You know, if you know the story, Watergate. If I asked you, tell me about Watergate, what are you going to say? President Richard Nixon resigned. Well, that's not the whole story, folks. Nelson Rockefeller became vice president. He was not elected. He was selected by Warren Commissioner Gerald Ford. Okay, President Gerald Ford, who was on the Warren Commission. Doesn't that strike you as odd? The man who covered up the truth for the JFK assassination selected Nelson Rockefeller to be vice president. And Congress wasted no time in waving Nelson right through, went right through his softball hearing, went right through it. Okay, yeah, we'll make you vice president of the United States. And Watergate, if you study Watergate, if you know the truth about Watergate, well, it was published in All the President's Men. Of course, I have a very low opinion of Woodward and Bad Warburg, and Carl Bernstein. I have a very low opinion of those men because they were just Rockefeller hand puppets. But there is some truth to the book. And what they talked about was Rockefeller Standard Oil Company bankrolled Watergate burglary. They come up with $250,000 in cash. The committee to reelect the President Nixon, they had garbage cans full of money, all coming from Standard Oil. Cash. That's the Watergate burglars, those $100 bills they were walking around with came from Standard Oil. And we never really, Standard Oil confessed to the crime. The Rockefellers confessed to the crime, but we never really learned where Standard Oil got that money. It was a slush fund. So who knows where that came from. They were using gangster members and mob members to get cash for them, bring in cash. We could talk about more. I talk about that on other tours. But Rockefeller became vice president. Now, shortly afterwards, Squeaky Fromm, I always say Nelson Rockefeller was only 10 inches from getting elected, from being president of the United States. Why? Because Squeaky Fromm, Manson family member, see, had a loaded .45 automatic 10 inches from President Ford's heart. And she failed to squeeze the trigger. Well, you know, when Congress investigated, this came through the church investigations, MKUlta and stuff. The black doctor, quack doctor, Gottlieb said, well, the experiments didn't work that good, so we just basically threw it in the trash can. That's a lie. I mean, yeah, the experiments had their, it had a few bugs in the system, but they were using these people. I mean, and you can see Squeaky Farm didn't pull the trigger. So yeah, and what Gottlieb said was some truth to it. There was bugs. She didn't pull the trigger. And then Nelson Rockefeller must have been a picture of abject disappointment. I mean, how much blood did he spill trying to get into the White House? Only know. Well, God only knows. I mean, we know about JFK. We know they gave the order to kill JFK, RFK. They had to kill RFK. I mean, they killed JFK because of RFK. Because RFK was investigating Italian crime bosses, Albert Anastasia. So he published a book. Bobby published a book in 1960 called The Enemy Within. He talked about the mafia working for the United States government. They were delivering uniforms for the United States. That was the United States Army. And he mentioned Albert Anastasia, the high hitman, high lord execution for Murder Incorporated. Truth of the matter, all these Italian so-called crime bosses were working for the high Protestants. Because where was the headquarters of Murder Incorporated? It was in the Waldorf Astoria, owned by the Astor family, who were in the board. Well, it's owned by, Waldorf Astoria now is owned by the Rockefellers through their Blackstone Front Company, which is all part of the Hilton chain. So all the hitmen were paying their rent to they were the landlords for the so-called Italian crime bosses, to quote Bobby Kennedy. I could talk a lot more words here and how it ties to the Army McCarthy hearings and goes on and on and on. It all ties back. But I'm going to go down to the Saratoga battlefield. Then we'll talk more about the Army McCarthys and Bobby Kennedy. So here's what happened. Bobby Kennedy was prosecuting the Italian crime bosses who were in the pay of the high Protestants, the Rockefellers. They were their hitmen, and they were doing all kinds of nefarious chores for the high Protestants who ruled this country. So Bobby never got far enough. They killed him before and what Bobby did, he got Joe Valachi to start talking. See, Joe Valachi was the driver for Murder Incorporated. That's how we know about the hit on Joe the Boss Masserina when he was eating in an Italian restaurant, got gunned down. And we know about the murder of Peter Panto, labor union, longshoreman, radical union leader. We know about they actually were able to dig up his body through the testimony of Joe Valachi. So the Rockefellers weren't sleeping nights. Rockefellers weren't sleeping good nights. So I don't want to get off the trail here. I want to get back to MKUltra. What the Rockefellers are doing, they were weaponizing these Manchurian candidates to kill world leaders. One well-aimed bullet could change the course of a continent for generations to come if you kill the right individual. And obviously taking out President Kennedy was that. He was that one individual. Talking about a little more about these MKUltra experiments. Suran worked for the Corona breeding farms. It was owned by who? It was partly owned by Desi Arnaz. He was basically virulently anti-Castro. He was all part of the. I'll sum it up as the Bay of Pigs episode to knock off Castro and return Cuba to the former, United States, become a property of the United States, essentially. You know, when Teddy Roosevelt conquered Cuba, the next day, John Rockefeller II went down there on McKinley's yacht, and he estimated he took appraisal of all the plunder and all the assets that they conquered. It was the Spanish-American War was financed by primarily Citibank, which is owned by William Rockefeller. They went down there and he took inventory of all John Rockefeller II took inventory of all the assets that they conquered down there, sugar fields, tobacco fields, and very significantly nickel. Cuba is one of the biggest sources of nickel, and nickel is used to make armor plate for battleships and tanks, and of strategic importance. getting back, I talk about Sirhan and Desi Arnaz. Of course, Desi Arnaz, if you know, was the husband of Lucille Ball. And Desi Arnaz he ran RKO Pictures for a while. Now, RKO Pictures, this ties to what I'm going to try to tell you, ties to Charles Manson. Because RKO Pictures, Radio Keith Orpheum Pictures, was founded by who? The Rockefellers and Joe Kennedy. And RKO was the first tenant in Rockefeller Center. See, the Rockefellers built up Rockefeller Center with bootleggers' money, like the Kennedys. They were using the bootleggers. The bootleggers get into, like, well, the end of the 1920s, you go into the Great Depression and all that. The bootleggers had a lot of money. Everybody else was broke except for the bootleggers. They had massive hoards of cash because they were selling high-priced liquors and stuff, high-priced spirits. So the Kennedys were tapping in on bootleg money to build Rockefeller Center, like the Kennedys, Henry Crown. That's another story. It's another story. Henry Crown, well, part owner of Rockefeller Center, ties numerous times to the Kennedy assassination, but that's for other tours. You know, I talked about these black doctors, quack doctors that the Rockefellers were using. Like, well, we got, what's his name today? Fauci. Quack Dr. Fauci. Black doctors, quack scientists, doing evil for the Rockefellers. See, the Rockefellers weaponize all this stuff. They're not trying to help anybody. They're only trying to help themselves. The ultimate goal of the Rockefellers is to have complete sovereignty of the planet and reduce all human beings to farm animal status. And that was what their experiments with Auschwitz was all about. And if you know, another one of the Rockefellers' quack doctors was who? Joseph Mengele, the evil doctor of Auschwitz. And he was doing experiments on the victims there at the camps, so-called camps. They were doing experiments on genitalia because the Rockefellers wanted, that was part of their population council, so to speak, and world population reduction. But Joseph Mengele worked for the he was getting research contracts from the Rockefeller Foundation. See, Adolf Hitler was a Rockefeller hand puppet, but I'm not going to get all into that. Adolf Hitler was a creation of the Rockefellers. He actually was birthed in the international building of Rockefeller. The Axis power was birthed in the international building of Rockefeller Center. Also involved the Japanese before the bombing of Pearl Harbor. When they bombed Pearl Harbor, the Japanese moved in. The Japanese moved out. Who moved in? OSS under William Donovan, who also worked for who? The Rockefeller Foundation. And the CIA, well, OSS became the CIA, and the CIA was overseeing these experiments for the Rockefellers, MKUlta experiments. You can Google a lot of this stuff, folks. Sidney Gottlieb, and they're all quack doctors / black evil doctors, black science and all that stuff. Dark science. Well, you can see how macabre this place is. This is where the Rockefellers like. It's kind of like a real spooky looking place, to say the least. But I was talking about Desi Arnaz, and he was very big. He ran RKO. But here's the thing about Charles Manson now. Let's go back to Charles Manson. Let's go to RKO. Okay. Charles Manson was on the Spawn Ranch, which was run by loosely to make Hollywood films. Well, who made one of the most famous films ever made at the Spawn Ranch? It was Howard Hughes, who was definitely involved in the greater Rockefeller syndicate, greater Rockefellerocracy. He's had a lot of interest in Texas. The company was Texaco oil drilling. They did a lot of oil drilling. And then he had his movie making enterprises. He was part of he made that. He won an Academy Award. He won, I think, the first Academy Award for Best Movie. But then he made a movie at the Spawn Ranch. I'm going to look up the name of the movie here. It was a very famous cowboy movie with Jane Russell. I'm sorry I don't already have this on here, but it was a very famous cowboy. It was filmed on Spawn Ranch. See, a lot of these things were owned by the Rockefellers. See, they're owned by RKO. See, the truth of the matter, the motion picture industry is not really headquartered in Hollywood. It's headquartered in Rockefeller Center. Now, you're probably, well, how do you say that? Yeah, well, Cecil B. DeMille and D.W. Griffin, they took the cameras out to Hollywood to make cowboy movies. Okay, and they set up these big sound studios. But actually, the financial bosses were back in New York City and Rockefeller Center because NBC owns Universal. Fox owns 20th Century Fox. They're all headquartered in Rockefeller Center. Time Warner, Warner Brothers, that was headquartered in the former Standard Oil building in 75 Rockefeller Plaza. Paramount, which was one of the first studios started by Cecil B. DeMille, that's right there on 7th Avenue. Rockefeller Center is actually one Astor Place. Rockefeller Center goes all the way to 7th Avenue, the Barclay Building and one Astor Place. They're all greater Rockefeller Center complex. So the motion picture, the financial strings of the motion picture industry go back to, where? They go back to Rockefeller Center. General Electric, 30 Rockefeller Plaza was how many years was the General Electric building, GE building. And they ran NBC, and RKO was part of it. And there was actually the first movie theater built. There was one of the early movie theaters was built at Rockefeller Center. It was an RKO movie theater. And Ronald Reagan made a lot of movies for RKO, and he made a lot of movies for who? General Electric. Well, he did commercials for General Electric. Yeah, he was a Rockefeller hand pup, but he was a little for the Rockefellers, didn't have complete control of him. And there was an assassination attempt on him. I'm not going to get into all that. All I'll tell you is the man who pulled the trigger, his father was a big shot in the oil industry, and we know Rockefellers are the oil bosses. But I want to get back to the Spawn Ranch now, that movie made with Jane Russell, Howard Hughes. Now, Jane Russell was Howard Hughes' girlfriend. Now, she was well endowed. She had large breasts. And Howard Hughes had his airplane engineers, his aeronautical airplane designers, design a bra for her. I think they used wires and stuff to hold it up. And then she, of course, for years did television commercials, Cross Your Heart bra, Cross Your Heart living bra, Jane Russell. That was Howard Hughes' girlfriend. And he designed that bra. But he ran RKO Pictures. See, which was started by the Kennedys and the Rockefellers. And I guess he battled Joe Kennedy for control of the studio. See, and then he made that movie with Jane Russell, that cowboy movie with Jane Russell, on the Spawn Ranch, where Squeaky Fromm, she was part of the Manson family, Charles Manson. But think about Charles Manson. Think about what I'm telling you. He was controlling his family with LSD. All right. He also had a contract to make a record with Doris Day's son. I can't think of his name now, but Doris Day's son. And Doris Day, of course, you know, was very close to Ronald Reagan. Was it Meltzler's name? Doris Day's son. And Howard Hughes, I believe Manson sent his followers. But here's the more important point. Manson, we talk about the Tate LaBianca murders. The murder of actress Sharon Tate and another couple, also LaBianca, Mr. and Mrs. LaBianca, were murdered by... Charles Manson didn't murder anybody. He didn't kill anybody. He ordered people to kill, folks. He ordered people to kill. Wasn't this what MKUlta was all about? To take some dupe, program them with LSD and hypnosis, and then go out and order them to kill someone? Isn't that MKUlta was all about? See, am I telling you stuff that's way out of line here? See, it all, if you connect up the dots, it all makes sense, and it all ties back to the Rockefellers. And another thing, if you get on the Rockefeller Foundation web pages, or you get on the web pages of Allen Institute, the Rockefellers celebrated the Rockefeller Foundation for over a century. They celebrated this. The Rockefeller Foundation financed this Allen Psychiatric Hospital for over a century. See, folks, am I making any of this stuff up? You mean they're going to let the CIA come in here and conduct experiments without the Rockefellers knowing about it? I don't think so. See, that's why when they killed Kennedy, they had all Rockefeller Foundation managers and the Warren Commission. They had Alan Dulles, that's another massive story. They had John McLeod, top Rockefeller lawyer, but he was chairman of the Rockefeller. He was chairman of the Ford Foundation. See, what had happened, the Rockefellers took over the Ford Foundation, and they were using Ford Foundation money for blacked out experiments and operations. Who knows where the money went? We don't know. We have no clue. Maybe it was used to kill Kennedy. Maybe it came up for CIA. But when Dr. Gottlieb said, he went before Congress, said, oh, they didn't work. The experiments didn't work. Well, they had some glitches in it. But and he said, well, we trash canned everything. We put the kibosh. That's a lie. They move this stuff. They stop it here, but they move it elsewhere. See, then they got to deploy it onto the streets. Now, here's an interesting thing. Oswald's best friend, George Marinsheeds, sometimes they call him Uncle George. He was an uncle and name to Jackie Kennedy, not Oswald. Yeah, you heard me right, Jackie Kennedy. They had a friendship. He had a friendship with Jackie Kennedy when that friendship began with Jacqueline Kennedy, from the time she was 10 years old until it lasted right up to the very day Rockefellers killed Kennedy, and well, she was the first lady then. I could talk a billion words about that. I do a lot of tours about that. But like I say, they would, when Gottlieb said, well, we trash cans and all, that's not true. They move it on to other places. But when George Marinsheeds, who befriended Oswald in the months leading up to the JFK assassination, this George was 35 years older than Oswald, and he was a Park Avenue, well connected with the Rockefellers. If you study Warren Commission documents, he was in Rockefeller Center, around Rockefeller Center, and associated with Rockefeller friends and family members. And George was introduced to Oswald, and it's probably some truth to it, by a colonel. A colonel, folks. That's one step below a general. This colonel escorted George to Oswald's ramshackle house he was living in, and introduced George. He was introduced to Oswald by a United States colonel. Doesn't it strike you as odd? Supposedly this guy was the defector to Russia, to the Soviet Union. That was all staged by the Rockefellers. See, they wanted to sheep dip him as a communist. That's what I was. Because don't forget, the Manchurian Candidate went to Russia. That's where he was programmed to assassinate. And he also was a man who was dominated by his mother, as was Oswald. He was a former Marine. I'm talking about the movie. So Oswald fit that. Former Marine, a man dominated by his mother, with a strong motherly role in his life. Went to Russia, came back, but then in the end he ended up killing his mother. See, there's little glitches in the system here, as Gottlieb said. But the Rockefellers, they're tenacious, these criminals. Now remember, George was introduced to Oswald by a United States colonel. He didn't say what branch. I'm thinking it might have been the Army, and I don't know that. But Bruce Adamson, researcher Bruce Adamson, who's solid, he thinks that this colonel's name was Orlov, and he thinks his father was one of the biggest KGB defectors to the United States. He was a general in the KGB, and he defected. It was a major accomplishment in the Cold War, a major victory in the Cold War for the United States. And he thinks that was his son. Now, he was Russian history, as George said, but he didn't speak a lick of Russian. So the colonel took George. George spoke fluent Russian. Well, he was a Russian. He wanted to get, the plan was they wanted to get Oswald's wife, Marita, Marina Oswald and baby away from Oswald. They wanted to get her out of the picture. Because she was the one who kind of blew the whistle on the Ed Walker thing. You know, Assas supposedly shot Ed Walker. I mean, he was 10 feet away from Ed Walker and he missed. But then he shoots the president twice in the head from a distance in a moving car. Now, so where he gained all this shooting ability. But these are all fake stories created by the Rockefellers. I should say bogus stories. Okay. But this colonel, yeah, well, see, why would a colonel check in on Oswald? It's very simple to understand. Oswald is a 500-pound bomb. Oswald is a nuclear warhead. Oswald is a weapon system owned by the owned by the United States. Well, say owned by the United States government, under Rockefeller tutelage, of course. So what do generals do? They walk in these they walk into these weapon depots and they check and make sure the missiles, they make sure the atom bombs, they make sure the bunker busters are all accounted for and in good working shape. So Oswald was a weapon. He had to check in on the weapon, and the weapon was being compromised by his marriage. So they had to get the wife, and they did. And if you know, Oswald's wife moved in with who? The Forbes family. John Kerry Forbes. John Kerry Forbes, well, would be his cousin, Ruth Forbes Payne Young. They were cousins. Opium Lord John Forbes, John Kerry, he's a Forbes. The Forbes ran the World Opium Cartel with the British royalty. Well, just recently, who showed up at the coronation? John Kerry. See, well, they're all tied in with the history of the opium cartel was run by who? The British royal family, and the Forbes family, Captain Bennett Forbes and Russell Trust Company, Russell Trust. No, I'm sorry, Russell. There was a Russell Trust. They connect, but there's a Russell and Company. That was the opium, and they were selling opium in China. They were smuggling opium to China when China had outlawed opium. They were smugglers, and who was one of the company directors? It was President FDR's grandfather, Warren Delano, and his brother married Laura Astor. Sarah Delano Roosevelt was FDR's mother, and her brother, I think it was her brother or sister, married into the Forbes family. They were all part of the World Opium Cartel. And Yale University was started by Yale, who was one of the directors of the British East India Company, which handled all the opium cartels, handled the world opium trade, and he endowed the university. So Yale is the capital of opium. The parents of the opium lords like Kerry, and they send their kids to Skull and Bones. The Skull and Bones was opium. If you know anything about Brown Brothers, Harriman, it was all seven of the nine founding members were Skull and Bones bonesmen, including Prescott Bush, the father of the United States president, and his son was the United States president, his grandson was the United States president. We know Bush 41, Bush 43, all bonesmen. But those people had to go through a hazing. They had to go through an initiation. Well, George's business partner, Ed Hooker, the Hookers founded Skull and Bones. The Hookers founded the state of Hartford, Connecticut. They founded Hartford, Connecticut, and they founded Yale University. Yeah, Pierpont. Pierpont was a hooker, and J.P. Morgan was a Pierpont, the financier, now part of the Chase banking empire. J.P. Morgan Chase, run by Jamie Dimon, run by the Rockefellers. He's their titular head. But anyways. This is why not only did Oswald was introduced to George by a United States colonel. Well, I was trying to say that Oswald, the eve before the Kennedy assassination, he slept in the Forbes home in Dallas, Texas. Ruth Forbes Payne Young, her son Michael Payne, and his wife was Ruth too. But don't confuse the two of them. Michael Payne was a Forbes, and he worked at Bell Helicopter with who? Godfrey A. Rockefeller, Godfrey A. Rockefeller was president of the National Helicopter Association. He was a test pilot for Bell Helicopter. And his father, Godfrey Rockefeller, was a bonesman too. There was 2 or 3 Rockefellers were bonesmen. Percy Rockefeller was a bonesman. That's another story. But George took Oswald to a party to introduce Oswald to a United States admiral. I think his name was Bruton. He was a famous, decorated United States admiral. And yeah, well, who gets introduced to the United States? Well, he's a weapon. It's like a general goes in and goes to a manufacturer. So let me see the bomb you're manufacturing. This guy Oswald was a deadly weapon. Now, like I said, I don't believe he pulled the trigger, but I think he was set up to take the blame. See, there was enough evidence the Rockefeller planned to put the blame on Oswald. He was a weapon. Well, you know what the admiral said when he was introduced to Oswald? He said, "Get him away from me! Get him away from me!" He knew what was coming down. He understood plausible denial. And this came out in George's Warren Commission testimony. I'm not making this up. So how does this guy, a man of, well, on the surface, a man of low station in life, although he did volunteer for the Marine Corps, a man of low station in life, is introduced to colonels and admirals. I could speak 1,000 words about MKUlta, how it ties back to the Kennedy assassination. And then again, Oswald was programmed by the Rand think tank, which was pretty much run by the Rockefellers through Henry Kissinger, Nelson's top henchman, Henry Kissinger, who now is president of the Rockefellerocracy, the cabal. And they also programmed Sirhan Sirhan, and also through Desi Arnaz. He was at the Corona breeding ranch. Now, these rich people had racehorses. Okay, and then you had Squeaky Fromm, the Manson family member, and she, of course, failed to pull the trigger. She was 5, 6, 10 inches from President Ford's heart. Warren Commissioner Ford. And it must have been an abject Nelson Rockefeller after all that blood was spilled. And then of course, they sent in a hit woman. A few days later, they sent, I believe the Rockefellers, dispatched another assassin woman. And what had happened was the Secret Service decided to do their job, and they pushed the crowds away from Ford. They had at least 50, 100 feet away from Ford. And this woman wasn't a good shot. Well, they assumed it was going to be another deal with Squeaky Fromm just put a gun in his stomach and fired, just like Jack Ruby did to Oswald. When they executed Oswald, it was pretty much a baby lamb being taken to slaughter. So the Secret Service decided to do their job, and they backed the crowds up 100 feet. And then this woman had a fire from across the street. She fired 2 shots and missed. I still remember the forward ducking that was on the news. Well, you can probably get that stuff. Those film bites on the internet. I'm sure they're still out there. So it was another abject Nelson Rockefeller. Now, the reason Nelson Rockefeller dropped off the ticket was because there were several articles published. Watergate and post-Watergate were published when Nelson Rockefeller became VP. Of course, he was waved through by Congress. If you study Warren, I missed my point. If you study All the President's Men by Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein, who I consider Jack-like reporters for the Rockefellers, but that's another story because the Rockefellers were running the Washington Post. The Rockefellers were out to destroy Richard Nixon. It's another story. But they said, if you remember what they said was,